I'm Brandon Clark. This is my co-host Swall Hall, and today we're meeting on Uncommon Grounds. We've got quite the episode for you. We have, along with our debate at the end, we have the New York City mayoral debate that we're going to discuss. Quite the colorful candidates in that race. With me as a progressive and Swall as a conservative, I'm interested to see, who our candidates of choice are. Then we have the No Kings protests. We heard about these all week, how they're violent, Antifa, domestic terrorists, hate America protests that are coming across America. Me and Swall are going to discuss if that was the reality or not, what happened, what we thought of what they stood for, and that kind of thing. Louisiana is having a bit of a battle of sorts around the gerrymandering stuff. If you've watched our past episodes, we've discussed the gerrymandering. It's kind of come to a head in Louisiana around the Voting Rights Act, with black districts, black majority districts being drawn, white conservative voters having a problem with it. We'll get more into the specifics on that when we get there. And then we're ending with the debate. If you watched our last week episode, me and Swall kind of started veering off from our topic to debate public and homeschools. So we thought we'd come back and finish that one off today. So public versus homeschools, the debate. But to start with the other debate, the New York City mayoral debate, just with kind of the media that it's getting, I'm sure most of you, more people than normal, have followed a mayor race. It's with Zoran Curtis Sliwa, I believe. Zoran Mamdani, I guess I should say his full name. And then Curtis Sliwa, or so I pronounce his last name wrong all the time.
Sliwa, I think.
Sliwa, the Republican, and then Andrew Cuomo running as an independent because he lost in the primary. I guess before we, we'll discuss the race, but just to start with kind of the debate, I watched the whole thing. I don't know if you did, Swa, just because I really like Zoran. It was pretty contentious. I thought it was funny that like Zoran and the Curtis dude were like almost tag teaming Andrew Cuomo. Like everybody just doesn't like Cuomo, which for good reason, right? I mean, he absolutely is a terrible person. There's lots of really good moments. I guess Swa, I'm kind of you're the wild card here, so I'm curious what you thought of the debate.
Yeah, I did not watch the entire thing. I watched a few extended clips, and then of course I've been watching all like the memes on
Yeah.
TikTok of like the little jabs here and there. Wrote down a couple of them. Obviously, Andrew Cuomo talking about Mom Donnie saying he's literally never had a job, which isn't true, by the way. I went and researched his story because I saw another clip of him talking with like a big old movie thing in the back,
Yeah.
and he was talking about like scoring a film, and I was like,
Yeah.
whoa, like he does music too. It's not true that he's never had a job. And then there was President Donald Trump will go through Mr. Mamdani like a hot knife through butter. That was a pretty good one.
Yeah.
And then I thought some of the questions were really insane, like the parade thing. I thought that was really funny, just because I thought it was like a waste of a like I mean, I don't know. I don't live in New York, but I just who cares about what new parade, like asking a candidate to come up with a new parade concept on the spot seems like a very big waste of everyone's time, but I don't know. I thought that was amusing.
I thought
But
it was crazy. They
yeah.
they talk about just because one of the candidates is a Muslim that they talk about Israel Palestine. Like this is a mayor's New York City mayor race. Like why are we
Right.
talking about this?
If I was in charge of New York, we would do nothing. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
like what it's have to do with them. Yeah, so I don't the debate questions were kind of stupid, but it was nice to see. I like obviously as a more conservative, I don't necessarily agree with his politics, but I do like Mom Donnie's personality so far from what I've seen. So that was interesting to get a better view of. But I don't really have too many other thoughts about the actual debate itself.
So
Um,
if you had to cast your vote for a candidate in the New York City mayor election, who is Swall voting for?
uh, can you do write-ins for mayor?
I
Because
think
I
so.
definitely didn't like I didn't like Sliwa, and that should be like my guy. But
Yeah.
um, both I don't know. Both him and Cuomo seemed a little sleepy just compared to Mom Donnie. So I don't know, man. I'm
Oh,
glad I
is,
don't live
is
there, I
Swa
guess. But
endorsing the socialist right
I'm
here?
not.
Yes,
I'm
sir.
definitely not. But it was. I don't know. None of them impressed me. I did notice the two questions that stuck out to me too was the how much everyone's rent was. I thought it was funny that was it Cuomo who said that Mom Donnie was living in a poor person's apartment, paying $2,300 or something.
Yeah.
I was like, bro, 2,300 is not for a poor person.
Yeah, which
You
I will
might
say
say,
in New York City, that's like on the lower end.
well, that's what I was gonna say. You might say it's for like a middle class, lower middle class, or whatnot. But like poor, the poor people in New York are living on the streets and in the
Yeah,
subways. Okay,
exactly.
it's not a
Yeah,
poor person.
yeah,
That's
and
not
like housing shelters and stuff.
right, right. Like I
Yeah.
thought that was a little out of touch, but like you said, the cost of living there is obviously higher. But
Yeah, yeah. I
um,
mean, anyone who
yeah,
watches this or my show probably isn't surprised that obviously Zoran is my guy. Zoran Mamdani is like one of there's not many politicians who are actually like super close to my brand of politics. And Zoran is like Zoran AOC, kind of Bernie, like those kind of wing of Democrats are more where I would place myself. And then on top of that, I also think Zoran's like one of the best like messengers or talkers that our party's had in a long time. Like since I would say since Obama, but Obama was like better at different things. Obviously, he was more of like that kind of like he sounded, I don't know, like academic and mature and this kind of thing when he would speak. Zoran's just really good at like getting people's attentions. And then he has like his one-liners are so good. He was like, he said, what I lack in experience, I make up for in integrity, and what Como lacks in integrity, he could never make up for in experience or something. He had like so many lines that I was like, that's like kind of a bar, low key. Like, so I also think he's really good at speaking. Obviously, like I've said, his politics I agree with. What surprised me, I covered Curtis Sliwa before on my channel because he there's one time last year he was in New York City on Fox News Live and he looks over and he goes, there's one of them illegal immigrants. And he literally has his like gang of thugs, the guardian angels, walk over on Fox News and like beat up this brown man. And then it comes out that it was a citizen. So like I've like covered him before. And like so I was like amazed to see him like running again after that. I thought, that's like the interviewer doing anything in
I
public.
mean the public memory is very short, so
Literally. But I will say, dude, off vibes, I don't hate him as much. I don't hate him as much as I would have before the debate. He's kind of a funny guy. I would never vote for him. Don't get me wrong. Still a bad dude, but like kind of a funny guy off the vibes. And you can tell he really likes New York.
That's funny.
Uh,
Yeah, I wasn't familiar with him until this race, but yeah, it does look like Mamdani right now is ahead in the polls by quite a bit. Obviously, with Cuomo trailing behind, and then Sliwa like
being nothing.
quite
Yeah.
trailing behind.
Yeah.
And it seems like Mamdani. I mean, he's got. I don't know if he's considered a millennial or Gen Xer, but he's got this. I guess he'd be millennial. He's
Mhm.
got the youth on his side, it seems, and he's a little bit more like digitally savvy and more,
Yeah.
same kind of thing that aided in even obviously not the youth part, but being savvy and stuff that aided in the Trump last election cycle of podcasting and social media and just putting stuff out there, doing a lot of interviews,
I think
being personable.
more
Yeah,
Democrats need to use his kind of style of branding.
yeah, I would agree with that. And like you said, Cuomo was kind of basically just focusing on his record because that's kind of all he has,
Yeah.
given his past controversies and him just generally being dislikable.
Yeah.
And then obviously Mamdani is framing himself as like the outsider, which I do think the left should be weary of. The last time our party decided to go on bet on the outsider, we ended up with Donald Trump. So sometimes it is better to know the monster you do know. So I don't know if people want
Hey,
to
I
keep
will
that in
say
mind,
though,
but
Zoran has more political experience than Trump had when he ran. Zoran was a state
sure, that is true.
assemblyman. So
That is
Trump was
true.
just the guy who said Obama wasn't born in America. So
Right.
yeah. But yeah, no, yes, for me, again, probably not a surprise to people who watch me. I would love to see Zoran continue. I would love to see him be mayor, have a successful term, go on to be governor, go on to be a senator. Obviously, I don't think he can be president unless that changes from now until he would run or he's old enough to where, naturalized citizens can run for president. But I really like his politics. I really like his messaging. I guess the last thing I wanted to touch on before we move off of this topic is what do you think of Trump? Trump's been having his thumb on the scale. Obviously, it seems to not be having much of an effect, but he's been threatening cutting funding to New York City. He's like said that he'll have to send agents. He said he went as much as he was going to look into deporting Mamdani at one conference. Like, what do you think of his kind of willingness to try to interfere in this?
I mean, it's just par for the course for Trump, but I think it's mostly blowing smoke. I don't see him actually following
Yeah.
through with any of that, especially. I mean, he might like send out some guys to do some research to see if he could, deport him. But as long as everything's like above board with his citizenship, I don't think he's gonna actually make any moves.
Yeah.
But it is irritating to hear him just. You got other things to worry about, dude. The government's not even open, okay?
Exactly. Yeah, no, completely agree. Yeah, so we'll move on to the No Kings protest. I kind of want to let you go first on this just because you're
Sure.
again kind of the wild card here. I guess just to tee it up, for those who maybe live under a rock and haven't heard, the No Kings protest, there was one during the summer. It was a pretty big success. It's people protesting against Trump, what they would describe, I guess to be fair to Trump, what they would describe as fascism, authoritarianism, his thwarting of democracy. This one drew a lot more kind of eyes because the Republicans were making a big thing about it, with the government shutdown also and all of that. It seems like it was a massive success. So, Swab, what have you seen? What were kind of your thoughts?
Yeah, so around where I live, there's actually a group of people who are out there once a week with No King signs. So
Nice.
this is just normal for me. I see this all the time, literally.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure this time around for like the bigger nationwide ones what the demographics look like. The people who stand outside where I live are a bunch of boomers. It's not really young people. It's just a bunch of retirees. So I don't know kind of what the audience was like for these things, but I would imagine it went from Gen Alpha all the way up to the boomers. But yeah, me personally, I believe in free speech and all of that, so I have no problem with a No Kings protest. Obviously, I disagree that Trump is a king or is acting like a king. I don't think the American government really allows you to act that much like a king. And as far as it does, it's just the executive orders thing, which the next president can just erase pretty easily. So, um, yeah, I'm just curious, kind of what the main purpose is. I saw a video the other day about protesting, and it was saying, yeah, like going out there with the signs is one thing, but a better use as far as like protesting against this wouldn't really work for the presidency, but for like businesses and stuff is to waste the businesses' times, go into the banks, take up a whole hour pretending you're gonna open an account, and then walk out and leave, and like that is more effective at hurting their bottom line than like standing out in a field somewhere with a sign where they're never going to see you and don't care. So sometimes I feel like these protests can kind of be a waste, but I mean, I'm proud of people using their First Amendment rights, and that's what America stands for. So I'm
So,
happy with that fact.
yeah, I guess my perspective, with businesses, I kind of agree with you. I was trying to think of I don't remember what they call it. There's a word for like when the protest is like just purposefully disruptive. I can't think of what they
Yeah.
call it. I think protests like that work better if you're protesting a business. I like the people who, when they protest like climate change, they'll actually go out and they're like going to do something to something to be like, hey, like something needs to be done about this, right? When it comes to politics, I think it's more about like mobilizing a base. And I think when you have protests like this, a lot of people, it's even just on like a sociological or like a psychological level, people are more likely to flock to something that they think there's already like a crowd supporting, like you don't want
Mm-hmm.
to be like the only person. So like just having these massive protests and then showing like, hey, look, there's all this like anti-Trump support, maybe is going to be make the individual voter more willing to mobilize themselves, their friends to also get out. And then in the midterm, which is going to be really, really important in terms of like having oversight, the Democrats need to win back the House, essentially. So, like, I think these protests stand as a way to mobilize and kind of motivate the base to vote for Democrats. Where we obviously lost. Kamala Harris underperformed Biden by like 6 or 7 million votes. If she had gotten Biden's number, the votes Biden had gotten in 2020, we would have won this election too, right? Like, because Trump didn't overperform his numbers in 2020. So, like, I think it's just about trying to get people back into this sense of like, hey, Trump is doing these really bad things. There's stuff we have to do to, like, we have to get out and vote and use our voice to stop it.
So would you say that the goal here is mainly just to uh, get Democrats, or not even necessarily Democrats, I guess just people in general, to rally against Trump for the next election, and that's really the purpose of this protest, rather
Yeah.
than any specific policy or anything like that?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think it's like two sides of that too. I think it's mobilizing and motivating the voters to be like willing to like stand up against Trump, but then also making the Democrats look like a good opposition party, because there's also like a lot of people think, oh, the Democrats aren't doing enough, they're not fighting, they don't care enough. So I think also throwing these big protests and having the likes of like Bernie Sanders out there like rallying the crowd, like it gives you images to run on also, you know.
Sure.
But
Yeah,
yeah, I
that
think
totally
it's
makes sense.
yeah, I think it's mostly political. What are your thoughts of kind of how the Republicans tried to frame it? I guess prior first. We'll get into the COPE. I don't know if you've seen that, but first prior with like Mike Johnson, especially. I covered him all week. He was calling this a hate America rally. They were saying everyone there was a Marxist. They're going to be paid by George Soros. That it's or in Antifa, and that we're all domestic terrorists. Like, what were kind of your thoughts of Republicans going out of their way to detail this as like the enemies within, essentially?
Yeah, I think it's dumb. I think it's stupid because, like I said, one, they have the right to be doing this. It's nothing that's like makes anybody immoral. And two, our country is basically founded on this exact protest. So it's
Yeah.
kind of a silly thing. Obviously, right now it's targeted at Trump and his particular behavior, but the idea that we don't want a king is pretty central to our identity as a nation, I would say. Obviously, within that, we're going to have different opinions. I know people who are totally fine with having a monarch who live in America. So it's not like it's a shared opinion by everyone who lives here. But
Whole lot of
as far
Catholics.
as
I'm sure you know a bunch of people who do.
I was about to say, us Catholics are, submitted to, you could say, two monarchs, one, Jesus Christ, King of all kings, and then, of course, the Pope is a sovereign monarch as well. So I don't have a problem personally with monarchy as a concept, but obviously, as America, I would have a problem with changing what the country is in its DNA. So I think it's dumb to criticize. Obviously, it's annoying if you're a Republican to have people protesting your president, but like, I mean, would they have really complained if people were doing this about Obama during, 08, 09,
Yeah.
or 10 or whatever? I don't think so. So
Do you think there should be political backlash for the way that they teed this up, and then how it turned out being demonstrably peaceful, that went massively successful to the point that now MAGA's like, you see them on social media. I don't know if you've seen these, but I've seen people say, somebody posted a clip. You've probably seen the overhead video of all the people. Somebody posted that and they were like, where were all these liberals during the hurricane? And it's like, bro, like, what are we doing? Like, you know what I mean? And then there's the other big one is, oh, this is a video from 2017, even though it's from a live feed and like multiple different news stations had a live feed. And see, what do you think about like, should there be backlash, I guess, from them lying essentially about what this was?
I mean, depends what you mean by backlash. If you mean like any
Should their voters be upset?
legal or okay, yeah. If you just mean that, I mean, should they? Yes. Will they? No.
Yeah. Yeah.
Will they even know or ever come to believe that they were lying? No. They're
Yeah.
gonna think that it was all true, and they're not gonna fact check it for the most part. So, obviously, I think we should always be angry if our leaders are lying to us. And keeping things from us and being deceptive and manipulative. So either side, by the way, not just the Republicans. So absolutely, they should be upset with anybody distorting the facts. So
Yeah, I completely agree. And I guess moving to Louisiana, as I said kind of at the beginning, we've covered the gerrymandering battle that we've seen nationwide. Started in Texas, California responded, Indiana said they were going to get involved. There's a lot of Florida said they were trying to get involved. A lot of players in this. New York also. Louisiana is kind of in this now as well from a different perspective, but similar purpose. And it kind of stems from a battle that started before this. So what happened was Louisiana was found to be gerrymandered. This was a few years ago, I think in 2022 or 2023, where the Black population of Louisiana makes up 1/3 of the state, but in their 6 congressional districts, only one district had a minority majority. So that's obviously underrepresented as to their population. What was found by a court that looked into this was that Louisiana first was redlined years ago to where most of the Black population was condensed to a small area. And then they purposefully drew their last map in 2020 to kind of cut them into districts where Black people would be in the minority, hence why they're underrepresented in their population. To make this right, long story short, Louisiana redrew their maps to where now minority majority districts were 2 of the 6, which is around one, which is 1/3, right? That's equal to their population. White conservative voters had a problem with this. They sued. It's gone up through the court system to the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court is now hearing arguments on removing Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. The Voting Rights Act in its totality is the backbone of what ensures minorities equal voting rights, right? Section 2, which is what they're hearing arguments over, is what bans states from drawing maps in ways that reduce the voting powers of minorities. And the Supreme Court seems open to hearing this, which is scary to people because obviously if Section 2 is removed, then states can draw maps in ways that would reduce minority voting power. We're already in the midst of a gerrymandering battle where Republicans are looking for any way to do this. The scare is that this is going to give them a lot more leadway to do it and to do so on racial grounds. Swa, I guess, what's your perspective coming from the conservative lens? What are you hearing about it? Let us know.
Yeah, so I had to look this up because I saw it come across on Facebook, and I thought, well, before I just freak out at the headline of, because I think the headline was basically just like Brett, it all comes down to Brett Kavanaugh or
Yeah.
something, and he's willing to get rid of the Voting Rights Act, and I was like, I highly doubt he's trying to get rid of the entire act, which is why I'm glad I looked it up because, like you said, it's about Section 2. It's not saying that we're just gonna black people can't vote anymore.
Yeah.
Like, no, that's not. And so obviously I've got a problem with that headline. But I had asked ChatGPT to steelman this argument for me because I was having trouble seeing like kind of what I was like. Surely there must be like some argument that they have. Like, why would they get rid of it? And my understanding is that they are saying that it's using assumptions and ideas from the 1960s about discrimination, that specific section, and so they're trying to update it and change it to better reflect the current, I guess, racial. What's the status quo? I guess is the best term. And so essentially, I guess they. Let me make sure I'm reading this right. So they want to argue that the way that they were able to draw the maps before was essentially racist, the same way that Republicans would argue something like DEI or affirmative action is racist, where the intended consequence is to uplift a certain group, and in doing so, you're actually being unfair to the other group. So, as far as I understand it, that's the best representation of their reasoning. Uh, Me personally, I just see it opening the door for abuse too. So you might fix an issue and create other issues. And so I don't know that just straight up getting rid of Section 2 is a good idea. If that's actually happening where people are not being represented correctly because of Section 2, then obviously I would want that to be fixed. But it seems like that's not really the case.
Yeah.
And that's
I mean,
just the excuse. So I don't know.
yeah, my two kind of, and obviously I know you're just kind of reading the Steelman. My pushbacks on those would be one, like conservatives typically just try to piecemeal away things that they don't like. Like in 2013, they also they fought, sued, got it up to the Supreme Court, and the conservative majority removed a different section of the Voting Rights Act that was also centered around gerrymandering, in which then you saw states like Texas and stuff do more racist gerrymandering. And they used a lot of the kind of same, like, oh, well, we need to update and improve it. And then what they do is they remove the act, and then the update that they're talking about never comes. And then they're just allowed to do that stuff. And that kind of goes into what my other critique of it is that it was found that Louisiana, through systemically placing Black people in specific areas, redlining, and then drawing the map in a way that splits them to where they would always be the minority, that was purposefully done, right? So like the way to undo that is to redraw the map in a way that you have equal representation to your population. So to me, I don't get how they could say it's like DEI or unfair if Black people make up 33% of Louisiana's population, and now they control 33% of the electoral districts in Louisiana. That sounds like math. That sounds like math that makes sense to me. I don't know.
Yeah, my understanding is less of specifically about the Louisiana and more like in principle what Section 2 allows for. Um, the exact quote that ChatGPT gave me is they don't want racial favoritism in voting laws. The VRA was vital once, but now it forces race-based
Yeah.
decisions.
Yeah,
And so
right.
they're saying on the principle of we should never make race-based decisions, that in and of itself is racist. Is why they want to get rid of it. Me personally, I agree if we're going with the most general definition ever of discrimination based on race, then yes. But that's when I just say there are different types and forms of racism, and sometimes making a decision based on race is a good thing, even
Yeah.
if it's quote unquote racist.
Yeah.
I still think it's a positive thing sometimes. So I don't know that you can just reject the idea of making any race based decisions in principle, because I think that that'll lead to some issues. Like race socially is a thing that exists. Like we accept that we're black. We
Yeah.
accept this. All of society accepts this. Whether you're a race realist or you think it's a social concept, it still exists.
Yeah.
And so to just completely ignore it is not that. That's not exactly what content of character. That's not what Martin Luther
See,
King
and
meant.
yeah, well, my thing
you
is
know,
like I think they just want the race-based decisions to favor white people because to me, like my argument is I think if you have this system that is very clearly set up in a way that like white people are always going to like majoritively benefit, and then you're not you see that like you notice it and then you say I'm not going to address that. That's a race-based decision in my opinion, right? Like if you I mean the one offhand, I know like the Veil of Darkness study, right? You know that black people are much more likely to get pulled over than white people with all variables controlled for, right? Everything the same. So like if you see that and then you're like, I'm not going to do anything about that because I don't want to make a race-based decision. Well, that's a race-based decision because that decision affects a race, right? And so like
right?
to me, it's like every decision in some way is going to implicate a race one way or the other. And to me, it just sounds like they want them to always benefit their race. So I don't know.
Yeah, I would agree. It's very difficult to not make race-based
Yeah.
decisions. It's like kind of a fantasy, but obviously we should minimalize. It's not like every decision we make should be like, well, that guy's a black guy. Should
Yeah.
I go to him in the grocery line or not? Like, no, like we shouldn't be thinking on that level. The other thing I wanted to say is, I guess they're also arguing that it has nothing to do with race as far as the party lines where they're drawing them, or sorry, you know what I'm saying, the voting lines or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
It's more about Democrats and Republicans, and it's a political thing, and so they're trying to say that the reason that they drew them that way is it was because of voter politics stuff,
Yeah.
not race stuff. So obviously, I don't know. I didn't draw the lines. I wasn't
Yeah.
there. I can't judge those men's hearts, but
See, I definitely
like you
disagree with
said,
that.
if the effects of it are such that it's affecting a race, then something should be done anyways, regardless of the intention.
Yeah.
So
See, I disagree with that just because like, and we covered obviously on my channel, we covered politics. So like we covered the gerrymandering stuff when it was like the main news. We were covering that every day. And Republicans try to make it political because they want to be able to say, well, we do it, but Democrats do it too, and they do it worse. So that's kind of where the conversation was like, oh, it's actually a Democrat Republican thing. But what's actually found when you look at like institutions that actually like study this is that Republican states gerrymander worse, but they don't gerrymander on partisan lines. Gerrymandering happens on racial lines. Like gerrymandering is typically done to suppress minority voting power. And it's just like, I mean, in red states where they have less of these, they're more often sued or pull back these voting rights kind of legislations. In blue states, they have more state laws that kind of guarantee these equal representations. And you just see it happen more in red states. I don't think gerrymandering is as much, it's political in the way that like most things are political, but the focus is always typically suppressing race, like minority power.
yeah, and to be clear, I was still continuing to just echo what they've been saying
Yeah.
and not my own specific views. I've never researched how voting maps are drawn or how they should be drawn. I'm not an expert on that, so I wouldn't pretend to know. But those are their claims, at least. So that's kind of the Republican side
Yeah.
of things.
Yeah, and we appreciate you doing the due diligence of the conservatives. It's a hard position to have under Trump, I'm sure. Yeah, so did you have anything else on that one before we hopped over to the debate or
Let me see here. I don't really think so. I just curious to see kind of how this shakes out. We didn't really talk about the Brett Kavanaugh thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Could
What do you think
you?
of that?
Well, I was going to ask if you could explain for me and also for the audience kind of why it comes down to Brett Kavanaugh and what kind of effect he'll personally have on this
Yeah, well, it's essentially because the other conservatives on the
Supreme
court,
Court.
I was
Yeah.
thinking, I kept thinking board is where my mind was going. Yeah, on the court, all the other conservatives are locks for yes or really close to it. Like Thomas, Alito, they're for sure yeses. Amy Coney Barrett is like a almost definitely a yes. Kavanaugh's the one that has voted in support of the Voting Rights Act prior. So he's kind of
Gotcha.
like seen as the swing vote here. Like maybe he will defend it, but also you never know with Brett Kavanaugh. So
Okay. Okay.
yeah.
Makes sense.
Yep. Yeah. So that's kind of why the it hinges on Kavanaugh thing. My opinion, I don't have as much faith in Kavanaugh as a lot of these media companies are making. I think honestly, if they hold a vote on this, we're Section 2 is probably done for. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'll get proved wrong. You never know.
Right
But
on.
yeah,
Let's
so
move on
I
to the debate.
hopping over the debate. Yeah, for those who saw last week, you've been waiting for this one, I'm sure. I don't remember what we were debating something last week. Homework, and then went into homeschooling and public schooling. So we thought we would hash it out here. The caveat I guess I want to give before we get into it, because like typically I debate like public versus private school. I don't have as much disdain against homeschool as I do for private school. Like if we were debating public versus private school, I would have a much more like and I'd have more animosity towards private schools. I just don't think homeschools serve the as efficient a purpose as public schools. But like I think on an individual level, it can be right for some people. That's I guess the caveat I wanted to give. But my position is I do think public school is superior to homeschooling because it doesn't face the same limitations that homeschooling does. I think it can offer more benefits through like diversification, socialization, these kinds of things that homeschool will struggle to. And then it produces similar or better outcomes in peer-reviewed literature that has relevant sample sizes with variables controlled for. There's a 2021 study. This is almost 13,000 participants that controlled for family socioeconomic status, family environment factors, prior health and health behaviors, and it showed equal academic achievement across public and homeschool, but homeschool students actually had less likelihood of obtaining a college degree and a higher likelihood of PTSD in young adulthood. And this is one of the only peer-reviewed studies that actually control for variables like this. I also went through and looked at a lot of the studies that proponents of homeschool usually cite. The Rudner study in like 1999 is a common one that cited in favor of homeschool, but the cohort itself is so poor that the study actually admits the limitations within the study. It says it's not reflective that homeschool is superior to public school or that homeschool students perform better because they used a far wider, more religious, more wealthy two-parent household with higher education than the national average. So it's not conducive to like the population of America or any country. And then that's the same across the board in studies you look at for homeschools is that and this is a problem that private school studies have as well, is they inflate the data by not controlling for the other variables that influence higher academic achievement, like socioeconomic status. And when you control for those things, it's the same. And then public schools give you benefits like like diversity of perspective, socialization. A 2024 study found that homeschool families have a tougher time getting into community activities, sports, or structured educational opportunities. So I think with equal academic achievement, slightly higher likelihood to get a college degree, and a wider range of benefits, public school is superior.
Yeah, I think my caveat straight off the bat, and I think you probably agree, is public school might on an individual level be better for some people. Homeschool might on an individual level. I think we're more arguing in generalities and kind of in I guess in principle or in concept, which one do we think is better rather than like every single human kid who ever exists, it would be better in homeschool. I'm not going to make claims like that. I'm not saying, there might be, if your mom is, I don't know why I singled out a mom. If your parent is a deadbeat parent and they're like a really bad teacher or like a drunk or something, and like obviously no, I don't think you should be homeschooled by somebody who has no interest in homeschooling you. So I'm not really talking about that type of situation. I'm just talking about obviously when the family wants to homeschool, is that a better idea than public school? So obviously I'm not saying we like force this onto families or anything like that. So Just want to say that out the gate. So yeah, the reason I think that homeschooling is better is for a few reasons. I think that one, it gives you a tailored curriculum and pace for the kids. Kids can dive into something that they're interested in more. When I was a kid, I got really into space. I could have spent my whole life studying space, and maybe I could have become an astronaut or something if I had had the freedom to be able to like actually study a specific subject that I was really passionate about. It also allows you to move at your own pace. If you need to take a little bit longer on a specific subject, you can do that. If you are excellent at it and you can speed run it, then you can. You don't have to wait for like a whole week cycle or 2 week cycle or however long a teacher decides to spend on a topic. Obviously, there's the one-to-one intimacy of working with your parent or a private tutor at home rather than a teacher working with 30 kids. You also have the ability to finish school earlier, so like graduate earlier. I know somebody who was done at 16 and is in college right now. Um, so you have that opportunity. You can also go into the trades quicker. I think you can learn more niche skills. Something that's cool where we live is that you can do. There's not very many rules with homeschooling, so I could, for instance, go do a whole lesson on automobiles and go to like an auto zone, call up the dude, ask him if it's cool to have my son sit in. He could sit in, maybe hold a tool tray, and they could put the lug nuts, and he could get that firsthand experience as like a 12-year-old rather than as like an 18-year-old kid stepping into it for the first time. So stuff like that is where I think that it clearly succeeds. And then just a few quick stats, and then I'll pass it back to you for your feedback.
Mhm.
But The NHERI, which is National Home Education Research Institute, found that homeschooled kids typically score 15 to 25 percentile points higher than public school kids in standardized tests. 78% of peer reviewed studies on academic achievement found homeschooled students perform statistically better than those in institutional schools. And then they also score above average on the SAT, ACT, and are increasingly recruited by colleges. And then they also have reported higher reported volunteering frequency. So they go out and help the community more, religious services more, volunteering, and all those types of stuff. And then the main reason that people are wanting to homeschool, and what I think the biggest benefit is safety. So you can keep your kids, or at least do a better job at keeping your kids safe from negative peer pressure, bullying, school shootings, drugs, or moral instruction from people who would prey on children and stuff. And that is 80% of the reasons why people say that they are homeschool their children. So, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so I guess first to respond to kind of the statistics you laid out, because I kind of did address that in my opening. Like the Coalition for Responsible Home Education, these are pro homeschool proponents. They even point out that supporters who rely on the studies that cite the numbers you did, between 15 to 30% better on higher standardized testing. They use non-randomized samples, so they're selecting the samples themselves. That obviously allows for selective bias. They also confuse correlation and causation because they aren't controlling for variables. They are like socioeconomic status, family background, parental education. These kinds of things are important to control for because they can influence the outcomes. When you don't control for them, you can't say homeschooling produces these results rather than these variables produced it, right? It's similar to what RFK is doing with Tylenol and autism right now, where he's saying, look, here's a study that shows people who take Tylenol have autism. But what he's doing is a correlation causation fallacy because he's not controlling for any of the variables, right? This is what a lot of the homeschool studies do. International Center for Home Education Research, another they're like homeschool proponents. They specifically on the studies for academic achievement, they show that when variables are controlled, there's actually little evidence that homeschooling positively benefits academic achievement rather than the variables that are not being controlled for do. The other thing, I guess, quickly that I wanted to just address, and I'll throw it back to you, was at the beginning you said about like freedom of curriculum or like things you could study. I actually think that's a problem. I think curriculum should be rigid. I think it should be controlled. We shouldn't be teaching things in a way that we know don't work, that we know aren't real. Like, I don't think that you should have a class on creation, right? I think we should be teaching evolution. I don't think we should have like these kinds of things, right? That will be getting taught ultimately. Like at 40% of Americans are already young Earth creationists. That's insane, and that number is gonna would go up if more people were homeschooled. So I think we should have a rigid curriculum where things like that are not allowed to be taught.
I don't know if I believe that stat. That's crazy. 40% of Americans are young Earth creationists
Creationists,
or
yeah,
just creationists.
young Earth creationists, and it was just a
That's
survey. Like
wild.
this isn't like it's not like dated, but it was a survey, and it
Sure.
was like a relatively big size.
Yeah,
Found, yeah,
that's wild. I obviously I don't want to bash my
yeah.
because it is a licit view within Catholicism, but I don't think obviously I don't agree with that view.
But you do think so? So you would at least then concede that that would be a flaw in homeschooling, that someone
Well,
could then teach creation over evolution.
yeah, I don't know every state's laws, but like I was gonna say we do have there are requirements. Like you do have to teach math, science, history. Like you can't just teach them whatever. You have to teach them the core things. Outside of that, there's not really any. I could teach a basket weaving class to my kid,
Yeah.
and they could start a basket weaving business at 13 if they wanted. So that's it's not completely
The
free,
problem
to
is
be
the way
clear, but
it's the way they teach it, right? Because you can teach science and you could be like, well, these are all theories, right?
yeah.
We don't know if these are true because
And
they're
I know
theories.
there's been some court cases about that actually, and I'm not
Yeah.
sure exactly what every state's laws or if there's a federal or what, but I know that there's been court
Yeah.
battles with
Yeah.
creationists and stuff, Ken Ham and all
Yeah.
the
It
Ark
was
Encounter
the
and stuff. So
yeah, Discovery Institute. That was
well,
for
yeah,
intelligent design.
because they changed they like changed it to intelligent
Yeah.
design to get
Yeah.
around the
Yeah. It's
loophole or something.
all that
So
makes me angry,
um,
but
but yeah, I think we can quibble and we can go over if this study is legit, your study is legit, whatever. Obviously those things matter and they add to the
well,
argument,
controlling for
but I
variables is
think
important, right?
yeah, I just mean I don't know which studies you're citing. For all I know, those are just as bad. So there's only so much you can do as somebody who's just
Well, I
researching
gave
it rather than being involved.
the study I gave, the 2021 study, it has 13,000 participants. That's a relevant sample size. That's one thing you should look for in a study. It's peer reviewed. That's another thing you should look for in a study. And it controls family socioeconomic status, family environmental factors like is it a two-parent household? Is it a one-parent household? The
Sure.
education of the parents
What I'm
and the
saying is,
health.
I listed a statistic that said 80% of the studies all agree. So you'd
Right.
have to be arguing that 80% of the studies are all invalid,
Yeah,
which
yes,
maybe is
yes,
true.
yes,
And
yes,
but I'm
yes,
saying
yes,
even if that was the
yes.
case, I think that the arguments of um, the downsides hold regardless of statistics. We know for a fact that there's 30 kids in a class. We know that for a fact that one teacher can only spend so much time,
Mhm,
mathematically speaking. These
mhm.
are just facts that statistics have no bearing on. We
Yes,
just know that these
right.
things are factual. We know that
Well, why do those
right
matter?
here because it matters
30
how
kids in a
much
class is a
instruction
benefit though, because you're
how
getting
much
different
instruction
perspectives.
you're how much I mean not in a math class. There's no different perspective on
Yes, there is.
x
If
to the
you're,
third quarter divided by 15 million or whatever.
you don't think
Um,
that there's different mathematical paths to solve equations? You know, you can solve
oh, there
equations
is, but
different ways,
they don't
right?
let you do that in school in public
What?
school.
Yes,
You
they
have
do.
nope, got in trouble for it all the time. Got to show your work, and it's
Okay.
got to look exactly like we told you, or
Yeah,
else you
that's an
get points
anecdote.
off.
That's an anecdote, and it doesn't match up with my experience, at least as a
Well,
student or as a teacher. As not, I guess I'm not a teacher, but as someone who works in a
sure,
school
sure,
and
sure,
as a
sure.
student, doesn't match up with my
Well,
experience.
yeah, that was very much my experience, and part of why I struggled with school is I could get the answer, but if I couldn't show my work, if I couldn't show it as matching what they told us to do, points off. And so I would get the answer correct, but lose points on the question because I
Sure.
didn't follow
So
what they told me.
the problem is
Um,
of these studies, and it's the same problem that private schools have, is that a lot of the studies, one, it's hard to get a relevant sample size in something like homeschool because it's so uncommon. And it's the same with private school. And then when they do, the studies often don't control for the variables, right? Because then that would limit their sample size even more. So it's hard to get a sample size with variables.
well, like I said, I'm conceding some of these variables. Like,
Right.
yes, two parent household where homeschooling
Yeah.
is possible,
So what I'm
but
saying
that's a
is,
variable that I'm allowing for
right.
because
But when we look at all things considered, it doesn't show that there's academic achievement gained from homeschooling. So that point is mute, is what I'm saying. right? Is like if somebody had all the same things that you're saying, right? Like these variables that aren't controlled for, but they were in a public school, they're just as likely to score just as highly academically. So that's not a point for homeschooling. It's a point for those variables. It's a point for a two-person household, for high socioeconomic
Yeah, a
status.
two-person household and homeschooling. It's both of them
No,
because
no.
they
That's correlation causation. You're attributing causation for homeschool that isn't there.
I mean, some of these, it depends on the stat, but some of them are homeschool specific things. Like
I know, but if the variables
having
aren't
time to
controlled for,
volunteer is a homeschool specific thing because you're home all day.
right,
You
but
have these things aren't
you
just
understand that
purely
like
separated.
so like in a study, right, that shows vaccinated kids have a higher rate of autism than unvaccinated kids, but it doesn't control for anything else. Doesn't control for like if the kid like the genetics, right? It doesn't control
Sure,
for heritable
sure. No,
characteristics.
that makes
You would
sense. I get you.
understand that it's not showing the
Yes.
vaccines cause all. So what you're saying is
No, but
showing that
it's not
homeschool
the opposite either
caused the
though. It's
scores.
not the opposite either.
Yeah, no, what I'm saying is
It's
we don't know. And you're in the
yes,
studies you're
exactly.
citing, we
Well,
don't
oh,
know.
I agree. I agree. We don't
And in the
fully
study that
know.
I have, in the study
But
that
I'm
I
saying the
have,
rest of the argument does enough work that it doesn't matter.
well,
Which is
in
what
the
I'm saying
study,
is,
well, on
uh,
specifically academic achievement, the study I have does control for those variables. It does have a relevant sample size, and it shows no
sure,
difference in academic achievement. And it shows homeschool kids are less likely to get a college degree.
sure, but you're act. That's to presuppose that I care about them getting a college degree. What I'm saying is the argument from my perspective is the benefits, regardless of some of those statistics. Those statistics matter to me. But for instance, I know you said it wasn't a benefit, but like the idea that my son can, you know, have some hyperfixation on some subject, and I
Mhm.
can allow him the freedom to study it
Yeah.
trumps most of the other things you're saying to me. That's
Well,
what I'm
that
saying. These
doesn't, that
other
doesn't,
benefits are higher. So we're not arguing the debate isn't is I don't know. I guess we didn't solidify an exact
well, so
text.
to be
But my
clear,
debate is which is preferable, not which gives you
yeah,
better academic
yeah.
selection. It's just which is preferable in general. And so there's more to consider than
Yeah,
just
well, I think
academic
a lot
selection.
of what I would hinge on would be academics, right?
Sure.
Personally,
And
that's
mine,
you can reject that. That's
I
what
want
I
to go
would.
to a syllogism I wrote because I think that that's part of the problem. Major
But
my
wait,
first
real quick, wait, before you do the syllogism, because I did want to say this to the point you were just about to
cool.
make. Charter schools, public charter schools exist. Public charter schools, they have more freedom in their curriculum. You can go to STEM schools. My school, the school I work at, is a charter school, where ours is geared towards inclusion and like hands-on stuff. So we do things outside, we do things hands-on. It's like nature. It's a lot science-based. Like everything we do is like environment-based, I guess is the better way to put it.
Sure.
Public charter schools exist. So what you're saying exists in the public school system with oversight that doesn't exist in homeschooling. But yeah, you can go on to your syllogism because I didn't want to, I had
Sure.
to
Yeah. Yeah.
that point.
And I'll touch on that after I finish. But yeah. So first premise: education should form the whole person, intellect, virtue, faith, and service. Minor premise: a system that allows flexibility, tailored
Yeah, I
pace,
reject that premise. I reject
family
premise one.
integration, moral formation, better enables whole person growth than a one size bureaucratic model. Therefore, a homeschooling model or flexible hybrid is preferable to a
Well,
rigid
okay,
public
not only
school
do I
model for
reject premise
achieving
one, but
the
premise
true
two is
end of
just begging the
education.
question. That's not how a syllogism works. But I reject premise one, and then premise two, you just beg the question. You said this model is better than the other, and premise two, therefore the conclusion. That's begging the question. I would reject both of those premises.
Well, the second premise does not say homeschooling is better. It says a model that does these things is better. It just
Right.
so happens to be that
That's
that's
begging
the
the
homeschooling
question.
model,
Right, but
which
that's
is my
begging the question.
argument,
But
which
that's
is
begging the question.
what are we looking for in our schooling? And I think that it should be well rounded. You think it should be
Yeah.
academic. I think it should be acamic, but also
Well, I
can
think
you
it should be
function as
well
a
rounded.
person?
No, I think it should
Because
be well rounded. I
I've
just
yet
think
to meet,
academic is high
I've
point.
yet to meet. I work with teenagers constantly at one of my jobs,
Mhm.
and maybe one or two of them, but it's very, very, very rare to meet any kids who know how to pay their taxes, what their W 2 is, what it means, how to change oil in their car, how to open up an investment account, how to do any meal prep. None of these things. They don't know any life skills. They have zero life skills.
A lot of that I don't
Zero.
think is the purpose of education personally, but
Right, which I'm saying I disagree with. I think
yeah, I also
education should
think
be
saying
well rounded and
faith is
include
the purpose of
everything.
education is also insane. Obviously faith has no purpose in education. Education should be for critical thinking, right? More than anything else. It should be for independence, critical thinking, these kinds of things. And then if we're talking about going on to higher education, study habits is a big one as well. But I do think it's about being well-rounded also. I'm just focusing on academics because that's obvious. That's what a lot of proponents try to put forth is, oh, homeschooling, you have smaller class size, it's going to give you better results. And that just doesn't seem to be empirically true, especially when variables are controlled for. It's the same argument you get from people for private schools. They'll say private schools score so much better. Well, yeah, because people who go to private school are a lot more wealthy and often have or come from two-parent households. But I think public schools also, and we're talking about all the benefits here, socialization is no comparison. The oversight is no comparison. Funding restrictions will leave homeschooling parents with a lot of things that public schools can offer, like school labs, specialized instruction, extracurricular activities. Like I said, the study that showed that homeschool parents find it harder to get into community activities, into sports or structured education opportunities. And then, like you said, we're kind of my point to bring it back to where I was talking about charter schools and here with specialized instruction. Sure, you have more freedom to teach your kid whatever, but most parents aren't going to know whatever, right? You're going to go and try to teach them about cars as a novice, right? When you could take them to a charter school that has, I guess in this hypothetical, like an auto focus, and it would be from people who actually know what they're talking about and not you who just like changed your brakes once. And now you're like, I can teach my kid, and that's it, to me, that's a big problem.
So two things. One, I think the funny thing about this argument to me from the other side is it's always the people aren't qualified to teach, which seems to me to be a self-defeating argument of saying the public school system failed America. And these people are so stupid. Like you said, I'll change my brakes. You made it sound like this is some bumpkin idiot because he went to your public school system that you're preaching for. And now he's an idiot. So it's like,
because he has overconfidence. That has nothing to do with
no. It's is he educated? If you went through public school, you should know everything to teach your kid. If not, then public school failed. Then public school failed you.
Because you went to public school.
Then it failed you.
Everything.
If you can't teach them what you learned, then it failed you.
No,
then it failed you. Then it failed you.
Teaching is a skill, and not everyone has the ability to teach. It takes things that a lot of people don't have. It takes a level of intellect that a lot of people are just born without, right? A public school can't raise your intellect past a certain level. There's really good data on that, to some extent, you are biologically confined to a certain intellect level. Your schooling isn't going to change that, right? Your patience, right? Schooling isn't going to teach you to have more patience. It's not going to teach you the way to explain things, right? There's a lot of things that go into teaching that isn't just like rote memorization or like just knowing something. That is an insane thing to say, that just because you went to school and you learned how to divide, you now can teach your kid the entirety of division, especially when you're learning it on a general level, where the purpose would be to go to higher education and get more specialized learning, right? If you're saying it's somebody who just went to grade school, K through 12, they couldn't teach you they could teach you the basics and then nothing else. So if you want to be a spaceman, I don't know, an astronaut, I don't know why I couldn't think of the name of an astronaut, your dad or your mom who's never been an astronaut isn't going to be able to teach you that just because they can tell you what gravity is.
Well, yeah, like I said, it's not as simple. I give the example of taking my son to the mechanics. Obviously, with homeschool, we're not talking about you and your dad in the office all 12 years. We're talking about being able to travel the world and to go wherever you want to learn from whoever you need to. And that's the freedom that you're allowed to. You can also take college courses. I know people who take.
That's not the freedom you're allowed to, and you're much less likely to do that at homeschool because there's more.
What do you mean that's not the freedom you're allowed to? No, there is no restrictions.
There's so many more. In terms of just life restrictions, the average family isn't going to have enough money to just take their kid on field trips all the time. To just let's do this today and this there, and let's go to France to learn France culture. Public schools actually can do field trips like that because they're publicly.
Well, obviously, I'm not saying take them to. I didn't mean like that.
Like most,
I mean that would be cool.
Most homeschool kids probably go their entire educational life without ever doing a science lab, right? I when I was in RBT, worked,
definitely not.
I don't know if you're saying no, definitely not to agree with me or not, but I worked with a kid whose whole family was homeschooled. I think we talked about this once before. None of them had ever done a science lab, right? And I mean, it was like an extremely religious household, so I don't know to the extent in which they even believed in science, but like. None of them had ever done like science experiments, anything like that. I think that is crucial. I think science is one of the top things we should be pushing. And in homeschool, you have the least ability to do it.
Yeah, I think most of this debate comes down to a difference in what we think education should be for, what it should cover, what the
Yes.
goals are. I'm thinking about, I think you're thinking about academics and colleges and careers, and I'm thinking about life generally as a whole,
No.
and kind of pairing it with raising them as a person rather than just academic achievements. Um, I don't think everybody needs to go into science. I don't think everybody needs to know expert stuff on science. I think you need to know the basics, and then you pretty much never think about it or talk about it ever again in your life. If you're going into specific fields, it just has no relevance to your life whatsoever. And that's why we have specialization, so that people can study specific things, so that I don't have to. I don't want to learn the US tax code. That's why I have H&R Block. That's why I have TurboTax. That's why I have my local CPA. I don't want to learn that stuff, and I shouldn't have to be forced to learn that stuff. I think that you should be able to learn what you want to learn. And I think that we stunt people's growths by putting them in a box, and it doesn't allow for their brains to expand and to explore their full potential. We should probably wrap it up. I can go ahead and do like my final thing, and then you do your final thing if that works.
Yeah, I thought this was your final thing, and I was going to do mine, but yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just responding to that, but I have a. I just wanted to recap essentially what my thing was. Where did it go?
I like the
Okay, here we go.
elevator
So
music.
yeah. So basically, my argument is stats. Yes, sure, we can debate that. We can look into the studies, how they were conducted. I agree, it's important. But I think if we're going to argue that, okay, there's no benefit, well, then we're saying it's more or less the same. Well, then that's where homeschool still thrives, because it still has the diversified skills and flexibility. It has the safety and environment situation, bullying, drugs, peer pressure. You're able to tailor the pace on one-on-one or small groups if you are in like a homeschool co-op, integrating your values and making sure that people aren't telling your kids, this is okay to do and this is okay to do and do this and have sex with them and all
Yeah.
this other stuff. And then I think the downside of the public school obviously is going to be large school size, rigidness of the curriculum. Even though you said it was anecdotal stuff, like with me, where it's like, yes, my brain could do the math in my head to where I could just spit out the answer, but as far as asking me to recant the work, couldn't do it. And then all of a sudden failing the class just because I'm not showing my work doesn't seem fair. And it's sort of a one size fits all mentality. And of course, obviously the wealth and money of the family is going to come into play, but that's going to come into play with public schools too. We have inner city schools who have fights and guns and cops being beat up by students and horrible learning environments all over the nation in the poorest countries and neighborhoods. So it's not like this is unique to homeschooling. And so that would be my argument, is that if it's all basically the same as far as the testing goes, well, then homeschooling wins by a landslide for all its other benefits.
Yeah, I mean, my argument's the same, but obviously for the other side. The first thing is a lot of the points you make, again, aren't even arguments against public school. Public charter schools exist. There's literally public STEM schools where you go to high school, you have a STEM focus. My school is environmentally focused. We do things outside. We take a science, like, or an environmental science-based approach to everything. We're like working math from like things outside, measuring nature, that kind of stuff. So you can go to these very specialized schools on a public school that actually have instructors that have specialized education to teach you these things from a position of expertise, not just your parent who learned a thing 20 years ago and now wants to tell you about it because he thought it was cool. Also, yeah, like he said, I think that a lot of the arguments he's making for homeschool are arguments against homeschool, freedom of curriculum. I don't think you should be free to teach creation over evolution. I don't think you should be free to teach that trans people aren't real, or that homosexuality is a sin. I don't think that you should be allowed to do that. And you only get that kind of oversight in public schools. In homeschooling, you can get away with teaching all of that. You see them do it. That's why it happens. That's why a lot of people choose to homeschool. And that's why people send their kids to these religious private schools as well. I think that's a big problem. And it kind of breeds this kind of discrimination and oppression that we see down the line. Also, yeah, to the point he made on academics, it seems like everything is about the same. Critical thinking, there's a couple other studies I didn't list. A 94 study showed equal critical thinking. A 2005 study showed equal SAT scores. The 2021 study I listed showed equal academic performance, but a higher likelihood to get a college degree for those at public school. I think academics do matter, right? Because for me, education is about setting you up for success. I don't think it's about faith. I don't think it's about indoctrination. I don't think it's about any of that kind of crazy stuff. It's about setting you up for success as an adult. Critical thinking and a good education, how to understand the reality around you are core things to that. And if you grow up thinking creation is real and evolution is fake, you don't have a good understanding of the world around you. And then last, when he says, if everything's equal, then homeschooling wins because of the other stuff. No, that's not true, right? You get more diversity in public schools. You get more socialization in public schools. You get more extracurricular activities in public schools. Funding allows you to do more things. You can go on regular field trips in public schools. You can have school labs in public schools. You have book fairs in public schools. All of these are things that homeschooling can't even touch. And this is before we get to other core things like special education. Public school is mandated by the state to have a certain quality standard of special education care that does not exist in homeschooling. And in terms of the resources needed for special education, I can tell you firsthand are very costly, right? They're hard to understand. And the average person isn't going to know how to just use a PEX board, right? They're not just going to buy a PEX board and then be able to run PEX. I'm sorry, right? They're not going to be able to get an AAT and be able to run an AAT with their kid. They're not even going to know what it is. They're probably not even going to know that they need it. These are things public schools are required to have. All of these, I think, makes it hands down public school over homeschool. Okay, guys, let us know what you thought of the debate. If you're team homeschool or team public school, obviously, we always like to know your thoughts in the comments. So feel free to let us know. If you enjoyed the episode, we're here every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So on whatever platform you watch us on, whether it's YouTube, Spotify, on the website, be sure to like, be sure to subscribe, add us to the playlist, whatever allows you to come back each and every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And until next time, peace.